Yo, what's up, guys?
Welcome to Tune Fever, baby.
I'm about to say it.
You know what? I'm about to say it.
Say it.
I don't care that you broke your elbow.
Now, trust me, I understand that may have been a bit graphic or intense for some viewers, but I had to show it because that single clip is one of the most metal things that has ever happened. And so I really think that showing this clip helps you to understand what metal is all about. So, starting in the mid 70s, heavy bands were trying to basically out heavy each other. You see, audiences ate it up, and the bands found all sorts of motivation to basically put the pedal to the metal. Oh, yeah. Heavy music was beginning to be less and less about blues and more about kind of extremes, which we did talk about in the last video about proto. So this drive, it pushed bands to kind of look for something new to do with their sound. The guitar riffs were in full effect. The singers were really incorporating a lot of vocal distortion. And each band had a pretty distinct identity. So in this video, we're talking about kind of what I would call heavy metal, fully realized, basically. And so I've just called it heavy metal, as you can see here on the screen. So, time to get this thing going. We are going to start off. Well, okay, here's the concept, right? So we have yes, classics, favorites, and interesting category. There will be two in each. These things will be recommended to you, my audience. What's up, guys? So that you guys can kind of get the sound of this particular subgenre of metal in your ear. So if you want to know what kind of the classic heavy metal sounds like, here are some of my recommendations to point you in the right direction. And I hope that you like this stuff, and I hope you find it interesting. So we're gonna go to Judas Priest's album called British Steel. So this is the first classic. It's from 1980. I'm choosing this one to mention first, kind of for a lot of reasons. I guess oh gosh, it's the sixth album by the band. For one thing, this album is instantly and effortlessly good. And I think it accomplishes this in a way that appeals to just about anybody. Because I want you guys to get into this, I'm going to put it here. So it's both polished and it's also rather nasty. And it's heavy, but it's also catchy. And there's a lot of attitude in it, but I find that it's kind of a warm welcome. So welcome to heavy metal. Yeah, so, and I'm serious. I'm kind of kidding, but I'm also serious. So while this is not my personal favorite Judas Priest album, it's close. Like, it's a great one, and it fits good here on a list like this because we're talking about kind of the sound of heavy metal, which, if we go back a little bit, this is the album cover from my favorite Judas Priest album, but it kind of turns some things up. So I chose to not put this album, Painkiller, by Judas Priest, in this list. I chose to put this one, just because I thought it fit better with kind of the sound of classic heavy metal. So there is that. But yeah, Judas Priest invented a lot of ideas in metal that had massive impacts. One of those things, whenever you hear the music, it'll be pretty obvious. The kind of soaring operatic vocal style of Rob Halford, which he executes so flawlessly. It's really cool. And another thing that Judas Priest did that ended up being very influential is the twin leads on the guitars. That was very influential. So they're important also for taking metal in a direction that sounds a bit less like blues, which really kind of dramatically changed the approach to metal music, even to this day. So you have to give credit to where it's due. And Judas Priest like I said, this is their 6th album, but it's still like their early sound is still surely found here. I think kind of the early Judas Priest sound is found on this album from 1980, though Judas Priest actually started in 1969. So we're going to move on to classic number 2, which I chose Iron Maiden's 1984 album called Power Slave. This actually is my favorite Iron Maiden album. So Iron Maiden introduced an element of storytelling and some technicality into metal that would be a critical influence on the genre, and it would influence a ton of future bands. So yeah, to me, this is kind of where Iron Maiden was at their best, in every way, and every member of the band was kind of at their best. And the songwriting is really cool and very ambitious. Like I said, they added that storytelling and some of that technicality. That's one of the biggest things Iron Maiden brought to the table, and they did it on a regular basis. And they have a really cool career with tons of great albums, and this spanned just a large number of years. Yeah, so I highly recommend getting into Iron Maiden and Judas Priest. They're definitely some classics that you must know to get this sound of heavy metal. So on to some of my favorites that I would say fit into this heavy metal, this classic heavy metal sound. We're going to talk about 3 Inches of Blood. This album is called Here Waits Thy Doom, and it's from 2012, right? So yeah, this favorites category. This is kind of maybe some deeper cuts or some stuff that's not necessarily classic, but it fits into this subgenre of metal, in my opinion. And my favorites, or these 2 favorites are kind of like my favorites within this. So I want to recommend them. So let's talk about it. So I really love this thing. And I do know it's pretty new, but it doesn't sound like a retro act. I would say it feels fresh, and it's like a very genuine expression of the super heavy and operatic thing that's so important to kind of this style of heavy metal. They definitely know what they're going for, as they have been making kind of a lot of great music, actually. Several good albums, I think, since like 2003 or 4 or something. But it was a struggle for me to choose between this one and their album from 2004. But I ended up choosing this one because I actually think the one from 2004 is a kind of different in a heavier way than this one is. This one sounds more like that classic heavy metal sound, so I'm definitely going to recommend it here. Yeah, love it. So next up, we have Total Universe Man, an album by Valiant Thor that came out in 2005. Again, it's kind of newer. So it's that classic heavy metal thing, with some kind of nice like jamminess, and also some crazy like Ted Nugent type energy. It's pretty cool. It's really heavy, and it's also extremely kind of zany and fun. I love listening to it. So these dudes are performers. You know, that's something you will hear when you hear this album and a lot of their material. They're really performers. It's pretty amazing music. And this is their first album, which is my favorite in their discography, and it's also the one that kind of got me into their stuff. So I'm gonna put it here. Hope you love it. So now we are going to talk about some things I find interesting. So, oops, just showed them both. What can you do? So I'll talk about this one by Raven first, called Rock Until You Drop. It's kind of the garage band version of this sound, this early classic metal sound. So it's also really, really fast. It's kind of like early speed, you could say. It has that kind of tendency. It's kind of going in that direction. And honestly, to me, it kind of, it's that speed thing. It kind of has some punk energy to it. It's very cool. But it's got real firm roots in that Judas Priest type of sound. So it definitely fits more into a category like classic heavy metal than it would fit into something like speed metal or something. Although I could maybe see someone trying to make that argument, but don't worry, we will talk about speed metal soon. So yeah, that's another one of the subgenres I'd like to cover among, I don't know how long my list was. It was a lot. So Well, yeah, and I'll probably add more subgenres to it because I'm not sure how you ever finish this series. So, but yeah, I guess I'll figure that out whenever I'm finished with it, if I finish. But it'll be a while. It'll be a good while. Um, so yeah, that's this album by Raven. It's from 1981, called Rock Until You Drop. Next, we're gonna talk about this album that I gave an early reveal for because I double clicked on my keypad. It's called Melissa. It's by Merciful Fate. It's from 1983. So it's very riff heavy. This album in particular is kind of distinctively evil, which will definitely influence some of the future metal bands that we're going to talk about. So that's one thing that kind of sets it apart within the genre of classic heavy metal, like we're talking about now, but definitely fits right here. Yeah, it's distinctly also. So I said it was distinctly evil. It's also distinctly operatic. So because operatic is part of this genre, like that type of vocal, right? I'm sure that was just an incredible example to help you understand. Um, but it's on this album, the operatic vocals are kind of taken to the extreme, and at first it's kind of funny, but it really does come off as genuine. And it's interesting. I think they took really the operatic thing to the extreme. And so I think if you wanted kind of the peak of that, it's here. It's also kind of a very expressive album. It's not exactly the raw aggressive type, though it is extremely heavy. I find a lot of kind of like expression in it, and I really like a lot of these songs. Yeah, there's one that's rather long. It's called Satan's Fall. It's a very kind of winding, great track. It's very cool. So here is the list of albums that I talked about inside of this video. I hope that you love each album, and I hope that you dig more into this subgenre as well, in your own little music listening get down in your life. I hope you listen to a lot of this stuff. But yeah, it's great to get into. So you want the sound of classic heavy metal, which is really like metal, early metal, fully realized. These are kind of my picks to help you understand what that sound is. And yeah, I just think it's great. So that's gonna wrap it up for me. So